we want to give you some background very quickly about Peak Parent Center's SHIFT project. Our project is through a grant from the Rehabilitation Services Administration in Washington, and we are charged by the RSA to provide current information and support from the federal perspective for helping families and youth with disabilities in particular, but also others, including professionals, to get the knowledge and the understanding they need in order to assure that the laws are being implemented around rehabilitation services and workforce services. So the slide you see up now is for the Workforce Innovations and Opportunity Act, which is the most current, includes the most current reauthorization of the Rehabilitation Act. And so it's a very exciting law that was passed in 2014 because it's creating new possibilities and new opportunities for people with disabilities in the realm of employment. And you're going to be hearing from our speakers about how the agencies in each of their respective states are implementing the law. And also, though, we want to make sure you know, because we know we have folks from other states, in addition to Arizona and Colorado on this call, that there may be differences as far as some of the programs and implementation processes in your state, but the federal law and the federal mandate remains the same. So we know that every state has a VR agency, and the WIOA intends that agencies provide services to help people to reach their employment goals. There are quite a few files in the files pod. I want to welcome you to download those files. One of them contains these important definitions regarding employment for people with disabilities. I would encourage you to download that so you have that. The webinar this evening is specifically focused on the individualized plans for employment, but you can see that there are a lot of other resources that we are providing for you here, both in the files pod and also on the web links. And then Betty and Cheryl are going to provide you with some connecting information to connect with them if you have questions regarding their specific roles in their departments and what is happening with respect to services and support specifically in Colorado or Arizona. So I want to introduce Betty and Cheryl, and this is their contact info, and we'll add that later for you in the chat pod. But as I said earlier, they are representing in each of their states the youth services and transition components of their vocational rehabilitation departments. And they can tell you more about themselves, and I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to them. Betty and Cheryl.
Thank you. Betty, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, just want to make sure. This is Cheryl. It's our understanding that through the webinars that have been facilitated as part of this project, you've already had the opportunity to learn about the vocational rehabilitation experience and learned about what it means to apply for services and determining eligibility, as well as heard a little bit about our partnership at within each of the states that we are mandated to have with our local districts. And here in Colorado, that also includes our Board of Cooperative Education Services. That being said, as it was pointed out to you by Beth, we are going to focus today in on the parts of the individualized plan for employment. And for the sake of time, Beth, I'm going to have you shift ahead, if you would, to the slide that is titled BVR Step 3, the parts of an IPE. There we go. That's the one. Our intent today is to break down the different components of a plan for employment and provide you with examples and answer any questions you may have. Certainly, a plan for employment is just as it states, it's individualized and created in partnership with the client and the DVR counselor to achieve a job goal that they have determined together that makes the most sense. So not every plan for employment is the same, and not every person gets the same services for that reason. But it's also important to understand how the plan for employment actually gets its start or can get its start from an individualized education program or the school records, depending on what your state may call those. And Betty, do you want to talk a little bit about that meshing, if you would?
Sure. So how do the IPE, the Individualized Plan for Employment, and the Individual Education Plan work together to the same end? Well, both of them are based on assessments that indicate the individual's strengths, interests, and preferences. And that language comes straight out of IDEA, but it works really well for vocational rehabilitation.
Yeah.
Both of the plans include goals and objectives. And I'm sorry, somebody has their...
Excuse me, Betty. Excuse me, could I just ask that all participants mute their phones? We're hearing some extra sounds of someone talking to someone else, so please mute your phones. Thanks. Go ahead, Betty.
Thank you, Beth. That's what I was going to say. So both of these plans include goals and objectives. And for Voc Rehab, the goal equals that end result. What is that person trying to achieve? The objective is how they're going to reach that goal. So for, I think for Colorado and for Arizona, we look at establishing an ultimate vocational goal or a career goal, and then objectives or steps that that individual might have to take in order to reach that goal. Both of those include input from the youth. We want to consider that youth's demonstrated abilities. In the IEP, they consider the course of study that the youth will use from their high school coursework to help them prepare for that stated post-secondary employment or educational training goal. And that goes along with those objectives that we as VR counselors establish with that youth that will help them reach their IPE career goal. We also establish the various responsibilities that that student will have to complete that required preparation. And so that leads us to the next slide that talks about developing your plan. So that plan is really a roadmap to employment. And in Colorado, their IPEs are done electronically as part of their data system. And in Arizona, it's virtually the same. We have an electronic case file and an IPE is created electronically as part of that case file. So what it essentially is an agreement between the VR counselor and the client where they state the client's employment goal and what they're going to do to achieve it, those steps, and then the services that they require from vocational rehabilitation to achieve those goals. And choosing and developing that goal, just as it says, should be based on that informed choice of the client. But we also want to include the factors that come as a result of career exploration. And I believe that Cheryl is going to talk about that.
Thank you. Moving on to the next slide. When we're looking at identifying your job goal, career exploration plays a vital piece of that. It gives you an opportunity to learn about yourself and look at what you may be good at. While we may think that, hey, I want to be that astronaut, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best match for me, particularly because I don't like closed-in spaces. Those are the types of things that we need to take into consideration. Also, what makes sense for where I'm going to live? For example, here in Colorado, it's probably not the best idea for me to say, I'm going to stay in Colorado, but I want to be a marine biologist. There aren't many jobs here for that. So why would we strive or support, why would DVR support a job goal where there is no future for you in it? So we have to take into consideration the availability and the industries that are available where you are going to reside at. DVR does this through a number of different mechanisms. Interviewing and spending time with you and getting to know you is one way. Also, we may send you for some assessments. We may just make some behavioral observations, or even take into consideration things that you have done, maybe volunteer activities that you've participated in, or work experiences that you took part in as part of your academic career. With those things in mind, you can contribute to the identification of your job goal by coming to your vocational rehabilitation meeting with any documents that demonstrate your strengths, interests, job ideas, past work you've had, those volunteer experiences, accomplishments, and goals for the future. Moving on to the next slide. As we're looking at identifying your job goal, DVR wants to know about your strengths. We want to understand your resources, those skills and supports you can draw upon to achieve success. We also want to know about your priorities and what is important to you. What are your concerns? Those challenges that will need to be addressed in order for you to be successful. We need to take into consideration what your abilities and capabilities are. Those things that maybe you can do right now really well, or you could do with appropriate supports, in addition to what you are interested in or what gets you excited in terms of employment. We take all this information, make sense of it, and help you to make an informed choice about an employment outcome. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we also look at things like the labor market outlook. We look at personal characteristics. For example, if being around large crowds of people is not your thing, that's okay, but we're probably not going to look at a job that places you in the middle of a football stadium with all of those thousands of people. It just doesn't make sense. We want you to succeed. We consider the entry-level qualifications as well as the occupational description. So if you're great at numbers, maybe a job in banking would be a good fit for you. Part of helping people explore these factors is to give both you and the DVR counselor a better understanding of who you are and how you can fit within the world of work. Sometimes people have limited exposure to employment, or maybe they know a bit about the careers that their parents were involved in, but that could be it. Or maybe it's just jobs they've seen on TV or heard about from a neighbor. When I talk with young adults, every other person I speak to wants to be in video games. Do you know someone like that? That might be a good job for some individuals, but it's not going to be the best fit for everyone. The key to career exploration and obtaining the facts about what skills and abilities are required to work in the job of your interest. That's what's important. That way we have a clear picture in mind of a vocational goal that you have helped to form through informed choice. So let's talk a little bit about Dick. Dick came to the Division of Voc Rehab stating that he wanted to go into welding. Okay, we did an interest assessment. It supported that welding was a good career path for him. In addition to that, Dick has had 2 semesters of welding in school where he received A's in it. Now, the DVR counselor in this case spoke with the teacher, and the teacher didn't see any reason why he couldn't continue to move forward in this career path. He has great support from his parents. And his interest is, what's important to him is to identify an entry-level career path that's going to allow him to grow within his community. Dick happens to live in a very rural area where there is huge oil manufacturing going on, and the need for welders is high. Not to mention the fact that he's willing to relocate if necessary, which gives him some flexibility in terms of where he could end up or move to, depending on his direction. He does have a concern. He recently had bilateral rotator cuff surgery. Now, a welder has to do a lot of lifting of various weights. In addition to that, they oftentimes have to put their arms over their head. That's going to be concerning to a DVR counselor. So in this particular instance, the counselor and Dick took the time to speak with his doctor and his physical therapist to see what types of limitations he would have, because we need to make certain that he can physically do the job. And he was actually released to go to work in the welding field with no problems and no complications. So, okay, we can continue to move forward. One of his strengths is that he performs better with his hands due to a learning disability. Now, welding, if you think about it, takes a lot of hands-on. You are constantly doing physical laboring types of activities. His capabilities. He's demonstrated that he can perform the essential job duties because he did a summer work experience in between the 2 semesters of welding in school. Just to be certain, the DVR counselor outreached to that employer that did the work experience and asked a few basic questions about Dick's capabilities. And again, that particular employer, just like the teacher, felt that this was a field that Dick would do well in. So through guidance and counseling, it was determined with Dick that welding would be a great opportunity for him in terms of a job goal to proceed and move forward with. Betty?
Okay, so now we're going to talk about Jane. And Jane just recently graduated from high school. And I don't know about Colorado, but here in Arizona, we have joint technical education districts. and those are sometimes called Career and Technical Education, or CTE, and sometimes in the past we used to call that VOTEC. So whatever terminology you used, Jane was involved in career and technical education as a high school student. She's a really creative person, and while she was in high school, she took some interest in design and actually took an AutoCAD class just to get her ideas about, is this something I want to do? It kind of gave her a chance to dip her toes in the water and wiggle them around to see if that was something she wanted to do. Jane has some mental health concerns, so she was concerned about having a job that would allow her to work within her skills, abilities, and also with her limitations, and be able to take the time that she needed to address her mental health issues when those issues arose, and felt that being a landscape artist would be a really good thing for her because it would give her somewhat of freedom of schedule. She also had a little concern about having a structured work setting with clear guidelines and expectations, because with her specific mental health issues, that was something that was very helpful for her to help her to be successful in the workplace. So talking with her VR counselor about these things, the experiences that she had in her recent high school coursework, and her desires and her skills and abilities, the things that she's really good at, like paying attention to detail, those things in that conversation with her VR counselor helped her to see what she would need to do to be successful in reaching her goal to become a landscaping artist. And so this goal was based on her informed choice, using the information that she knew about her own skills and abilities and strengths, as well as the information about the labor market. In Arizona, don't know about Colorado, but landscaping's a big deal. And especially with the water crisis, we need more qualified people in that occupation. So what are the steps to achieve a job goal? Well, that's where the objectives come in. When you're doing a big job, it's helpful if you can break it down into smaller chunks. And I know that's the deal with a lot of folks with learning disabilities, but you know what? For us folks that don't have learning disabilities, taking a big job and breaking it down into steps can really help us to not get lost within that job. So objectives tell us what we're going to accomplish. What's that end result? It can also identify what we need to help us get there. And in VR speak, that's those goods and services. For vocational rehabilitation, we want to identify when are those goods and services going to start, and when do we expect them to be completed? Who's going to do what for this particular goal? Is it the VR counselor going to help with something? Is it the client responsible for certain steps? Do they have the main responsibility? And how are you going to know when the individual has completed that objective? What is that measurement going to look like? And who's going to pay for it? That's something that I think every client wants to know. Is that something I'm going to have to cough up the money for? Oh dear, So we identify all of those things in the IPE, and we want to make it clear what is the end result supposed to be, what are we trying to do here, and why does the individual need each service that's identified in the VR plan. I think we're ready to move on to the next. Cheryl, if you have more things to talk about, please jump in.
Absolutely. I think we're doing good. Okay, so once we actually have identified an employment outcome, we can start breaking it down into pieces, as Betty has talked about, in objectives to identify what steps or services and goods a client is going to need in order to achieve that job goal. So as you can see here from this slide, DVR can offer a really broad menu of services and goods, but any individual service or a specific combination of services may not be available to each client. Again, plans for employment are individualized and specific to that person, their job goal, and the outcomes that we are looking to accomplish. Next slide, please. That being said, there is a rule of thumb in voc rehab that most of us, I liked how Betty said VR speak. Any goods or services that are provided must be necessary, appropriate, and least possible cost. Now, each state may present this in a different way, but the bottom line is we need to know what a person actually needs in order to achieve those outcomes and objectives that we are looking at, and focus in terms of our steps in that direction so that we are moving towards a career path. As we do this, we look to identify the barriers that stand between where the client is today and what the outcome is that we've agreed upon for them to achieve. We consider the obstacles that are present as a result of their disability. Maybe it's sensory loss or the inability to complete applications independently or follow multidisciplinary steps. Whatever it may be, we are considering a variety of factors. That also includes non-disability related barriers. For example, maybe a client's lack of specific degree required to work in the identified field, or the client's limited access to transportation. Any need that essentially needs to be addressed in order for that client to achieve their employment outcome would be identified as a service need. That would be necessary, okay? Now, DVR may not always be the entity to help them meet that need, but we will assist in identifying it and ensure that it is being addressed. And we'll get more into that when we actually talk about the different steps and provide examples. Only after we've identified which services are necessary can we begin to consider how to appropriately meet each of those service needs. So appropriate in this case means the goods or service must be suitable to the individual and of sufficient quality to meet their needs. In order to determine whether something is suitable, we need to look at each unique situation. And as part of that, we consider sufficient quality in terms of, is the client going to be able to accept something or a service or a good at a certain level, and will that be adequate enough for them to achieve the goal, or are they going to require option B? So this brings also into play informed choice. Finally, we're a government program. We can never forget that. And as such, voc rehab always needs to look at least possible cost. As part of that, and again, Betty alluded to this earlier, we do look at financial contributions for certain services, not all, and that varies from state to state. We also must look at comparable benefits. So if there is another program out there or a nonprofit organization that provides a service or a good that is necessary and appropriate as a step to achieve the outcome, we will explore it with the client to determine if it will meet the need so that that step can be accomplished. From there, we move forward with actually developing the next portion of a plan, which is how progress will be measured. Betty?
Thank you. So when we're talking about progress and how we measure it, we have to establish some criteria for measurement. And that criteria has to be clear both to the VR counselor and to the client. We also identify timelines to achieve certain steps. This is what's done in the school IEP, and it's also done in the VR IPE as well, because we are a time-limited program, even though time limits are specific to individuals. Some individuals may need 2 years to reach their goal, given the preparation required, and some individuals may require 6 years to reach their goal. So time limited is relative to the individual. We also need to identify the standards. What will the individual be expected to achieve? What will they have to do to meet those standards? For example, if VR sends an individual for post-secondary education, in all states, we require that they have a grade point average sufficient to keep them out of academic probation. And usually that's at least a C average. So we look at what is going to benefit the individual in terms of those standards that they have to maintain in order to benefit from that service. And then we also look at their overall progress towards the employment outcome. We, a lot of times, will monitor this by the client report. The client tells us what they're doing. It may be that the client who is attending a post-secondary institution would be responsible to provide their semester grade reports to their VR client or their VR counselor, and that would document their grades and thus their maintaining those identified standards. It could also be a report from a vendor or a service provider indicating what that individual's progress is towards their goal or the end result of that particular service. It could be a monthly report from the client as well. So measurement, again, has to be clear and concise. Everyone has to understand the expectations. So I believe Cheryl is now going to talk about Dick again and what his steps are to achieve his job goal.
Okay, so I'm looking at and doing a time check for myself. We're going to kind of go through this rather quickly. The intent and purpose, and we do this with Jane as well, is to give you an idea of what you can expect to see on a plan for employment, putting these components together. So as we know, Dick wants to be a welder, but he does not have the necessary certificate in order to do that job and be hired officially in that vocation. So the first objective here is that he's going to obtain his certificate in welding from the community college. Now, this is just a 6-month program at this particular community college, so that is why it has an end date of June 2016, assuming we started in January. As part of that, he's going to maintain monthly contact with DVR to work on semester preparations and problem-solving class issues that may arise or any accommodations he needs in order to be successful in the classroom. His responsibilities to DVR is to provide us with copies of his current semester grades, which will give us an opportunity to monitor his progress. He will provide his next semester registration, since DVR will be contributing a portion financially to him participating in this training program. And he will provide a printout from student cashiering with the current term balance after all of his student financial aid has been applied and family contribution. Lastly, to ensure that he has the books he needs and the supplies he needs in order to succeed, he will bring DVR a proposed student charges from the bookstore. His last responsibility is that he will maintain a C in each class. Go ahead, you're all right. As you begin to break down this objective, we talk about the semester preparations. And we have decided to hire the vendor ABC Job Development Company to help him between January and June to ensure that he does get all of the necessary paperwork to DVR in a timely manner. DVR is going to pay for those services to ABC Job Development Company. As it pertains to his tuition, student fees, or other general supplies, those will be provided by the community college, again, from January to June. But it's going to be a collaborative effort paid for through student financial aid. His parents have agreed to make a contribution, and then DVR will pick up the remainder of that. And lastly, his books and supplies will be goods that are necessary. This is also provided through the community college for the same time frame that he is attending, and DVR will be paying 100% of those books and supplies. Next, objective number 2. Dick will increase his job readiness skills. So after he completes his training program, he's going to need to make certain he has the skills necessary to go to work to find that job so that he can maintain it. And what we've agreed to with Dick is that he will follow up with a teleconference call DVR, will follow up with the teleconference call on his work experience to identify any areas of concern that may require additional support in order for him to be successful on the job. So this will be a one-on-one interview with that employer. Then a verbal report from the client that employment has been obtained and maintained will follow the completion of an application, resume, and interview. So again, this comes back to Dick's responsibilities in terms of staying in touch with Voc Rehab throughout this process. We're also going to obtain monthly progress reports from the ABC Job Development Company. They'll keep us in the loop in terms of how Dick is progressing on his job search and any job-seeking skills training that they did with him, that sort of a thing. Next slide. The goods and services related to that objective include the work experience that he completed. That was something that he did as he was preparing to exit out of the district, and it was a collaborative effort with a local employer. Job seeking and job retention skills training, we talked about that ABC Job Development Company would be providing those, and DVR is going to pay for those. Those won't actually begin until after his training program has completed so that he can really focus in on what he needs to learn as part of his certificate program. And then ABC Job Development Company will also be paid to provide him with job leads, help him out in that process of actually obtaining a job. Next slide. Jane?
So this is Jane, and remember her job goal is to become a landscape designer. So the first thing that she needs to do is secure and follow through with supportive services that will help her succeed. So she does have to stay in contact with her vocational rehabilitation counselor, either by phone, email, or in person. She has to keep her VR counselor updated on any kinds of problems or concerns that she's having to help her with getting those things resolved and maintain her mental health through her ongoing counseling and medication. Those are her responsibilities for helping her to achieve this particular objective. The services and goods that she'll receive in association with this objective would be vocational counseling and guidance provided by her Voc Rehab counselor, and that is a service provided by Voc Rehab. And then her insurance will cover her mental health treatment and the prescriptions for the medications that she needs to take to maintain her mental health capacities. Her second objective concerns obtaining the interview clothing that will help her to promote the appropriate image for obtaining employment, and she will report back after she has obtained this clothing about the satisfaction of the clothes obtained. So a grant program is going to provide her with interview clothing from the loan closet, and she has a couple of months to achieve that. On her third objective, she's going to gain skills to identify those appropriate job openings, to apply for, interview for, and follow up on that application independently so that she can gain suitable employment. She will continue to make monthly progress reports with her VR counselor to indicate that I'm sorry, I messed that up. She's going to make progress reports with her employer and ensure that she's being following up with the things that she's supposed to be doing regarding her applications and interviews. She has a master application and a resume that she's going to use for applications in the future, and she has a plan that outlines her job search strategies with how she's going to achieve these goals. The goods and services that she's going to receive in association with these would be her job-seeking skills from ABC Job Company, and VR is going to pay for that, as well as the job placement provided by ABC Job Development Company, also paid by Voc Rehab. Once she's employed, she'll learn the tasks and skills of that new job, and she needs to be in communication with her VR counselor regarding any kind of complications on the job so that they can research and resolve this together. Voc Rehab will also work with the employer to make sure that their expectations and guidelines are in place and that the client understands those completely and will receive monthly progress reports from her employer. So again, she'll receive the job training from her employer, and that's paid for by her employer, but employer education and employee advocacy to create opportunities for success will be paid for by vocational rehabilitation. So,
Okay. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, that leads us to the very last portion of a plan for employment, which is especially important. A plan for employment cannot be put into motion and towards working for that employment outcome until it is signed and dated by both the client and the DVR counselor. By signing the plan, you are certifying that you participated in the development of that plan, You had the opportunity to make informed choices throughout the entire process. So in helping to identify the steps, who will be providing those services, and what timelines make the best sense for the objectives that you are trying to achieve. You have spoken with your DVR counselor about your rights and responsibilities as it pertains to that plan for employment, and that you agree with the terms that have been set forth in that plan. Lastly, we always want to ensure that you have received a copy of that plan so that you have the ability to refer back to it as needed and you know what's going to happen next. It also gives you that opportunity, if something changes, to get back in touch with the DVR counselor to say, we need to make an amendment here. Things aren't going well in this direction. Can we explore another alternative option that may be available, say, for a service provider? Those types of things. Would you add anything to that, Betty?
No, I think that really hits it right on the head.
Okay. That brings us back to getting into the voc rehab process, because once a plan for employment has been put into motion, the intent is that after all the goods and services are received, that a person can actually go to work. And I know you've covered what it means to be closed rehabilitated in previous trainings with SHIFT. So I would like to go ahead and Beth, do you want to open it up for questions?
Yes, I certainly would. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks to both of you. We have a couple of questions in the pod already. Cheryl, I see you've responded to one. I think just one point that I'd like to make, and especially because of the nature of at least one of the questions I saw, the examples you all have given obviously are of individuals, and they're just examples, and we know that individuals have full range of unique kinds of abilities and challenges. But I do think the one question that was asked about what about folks with more significant needs, because I know that there's quite a bit in the WIOA focused on customized employment and supported employment. So maybe you could just briefly address that.
Absolutely. I kind of wanted to see what Betty was going to type here. I see she's typing now. Oh. Well, while Betty is typing, I can go ahead and talk about individuals with more significant needs than something like a learning disability. The process doesn't change for the most part in terms of developing a plan for employment. There are pieces to a plan for employment even before we get to that we may try to do, such as a trial work experience with an individual, depending upon the severity of their disability. But that being said, the process is still the same. And yes, we would look at their different components that they can bring in terms of their strengths, interests, aptitudes, capabilities, etc. And in terms of what Beth referenced, customized employment, that is not uncommon to voc rehab. Customized employment, a good example of that would be to go in and identify from a place of business what needs they have or what gaps they have within that business, and determine if there is a skill set there that would be an appropriate match for an individual. For example, I can recall, used to love going down on 16th Street Mall in Denver. For those of you who are familiar with it, there is a Ross down there. And I'd go down during lunchtime. And during lunchtime, they were always swamped because everybody that worked downtown went there for the great sales. And it always seemed inevitable that they received their that's the time of day right at lunch when they received their shipping orders in. And they had a mandate that they had to get them out and unpacked. And it was practically impossible because they didn't have the staff coverage to do that and meet the needs of customers wanting to pay for items and purchase things. As a result, they were losing people. And I simply went down and I approached the manager one day and I said, I noticed you have this need. And it's every day for about 2 hours between 11 to 1, and I'm wondering if we could try something. So we talked about possibly putting somebody in that position who was interested in retail and loved working with people, but did well with simple step tasks, and we found a perfect match for it. So that would be an example of customized employment. I don't know, Betty, would you add anything to that?
I think you've got that really well. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
While we're waiting to see if there are other questions, I just wanted to mention, too, that in the files pod, there are a couple of documents that have some great resource links to videos that show the possibilities for customized and supported employment. And there's also, Betty just referenced in the files pod that are in the chat about the career exploration resources. And there was one in particular that made me think of that we actually use in our workshop on employment that the SHIFT project is doing, and that's called careeronestop.org. And it's a great way. It's got videos. It's got career clusters, a huge list of career clusters, and then the different types of roles that need to be played within those clusters, and videos to show young people who are interested how they might access and learn more about those different things and get ideas for themselves. There's some more questions in the pod, Cheryl and Betty. Do you want to just go ahead and address those? Or, yeah.
Okay. Whoops. Margarita, your question is how to define a path when the person doesn't have a well-defined interest. You know, what 15, 16, 17 to 21-year-old does. You know, I look at my teenage daughter who's 16 today, and she has no direction, no interest. She has a very flat affect, and it is difficult to get her involved in things because she is so shy. And I think that in some aspects she's very typical and standard that way. It's more taking an opportunity, and this leads into Julie's question, of what services and supports can we collaborate with education on to prepare those students for making that linkage to the adult world as they are exiting out of education. That includes conversations between yourself, DVR, and education and your student to discuss what makes the most sense. If that student is beginning to look at and think about, as part of their IEP, what's next, what should I be looking at, or if as part of the activities that they are doing in the school district include things like awareness, exploration, and preparation, then maybe it's a good time to start getting Voc Rehab involved, because they can support the school district in providing activities such as I don't know, volunteer opportunities or bringing career speakers into the classroom. Maybe it's work-based experiences or job shadows, or coming in and even doing some hands-on assessments with students to begin giving them the exposure that they need so that they can start thinking about the world of work. And that could be done either in group or as a group with a classroom, or maybe it is individualized as part of a plan for employment. Just depends again upon that individual. Betty, would you add anything to that?
I was thinking, yes, I would.
Okay, please do.
Kids need to be exposed to work, period. And volunteering provides a wonderful opportunity for youth to perhaps pursue their interests, but do so in a way where they're giving back to their community. And in pursuing those interests in giving back to their community, they have the opportunity to gain some valuable work experience, learn about appropriate work behavior, and sometimes it's learn about what they don't want to do. So looking perhaps within their own high school campus and looking for opportunities on their high school campus where they might be able to get some work experience can be a very valuable tool for those youth to think about what they want to do. I have some wonderful resources that I'm happy to share if anyone chooses to email me. And it helps youth with how to do informational interviews. What kinds of questions do you ask? Have some other opportunities like AmeriCorps, which provides a more structured volunteer assignment where an individual might work for a nonprofit agency and be able to develop some really great work skills as well as network and develop hard experience that they can put on a resume. So I know we're running out of time, but I'm full of ideas, so email me or call me.
I want to add to that really quick. I know time is of the essence here, but Betty brings up a good point. This is as easy as looking in your backyard. We are not talking about recreating the wheel anywhere. And this also includes beginning to discuss work at home. You yourselves as parents can start to set the bar at home. I am amazed at how many young adults apply for services here in Colorado. They have no expectations at home. They don't have to pick up their room. They don't have to make their bed. They don't take out the trash or do their own laundry. By 16 and 17 years old, my expectation would be that they should be contributing in some manner to the household. And by maintaining those expectations of your student, you're helping them develop the skills and exposing them to skill sets that they will need in the world of work. There's also things as easy as bringing your child to work to give them some exposure to what goes on and what you do in your busy days. So again, as Betty mentioned, the ideas start to flow once you start talking about them, and it's hard to cut it off, so I'll stop right there.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry the time goes by so quickly during these one-hour webinars. Betty and Cheryl, thank you so much. Just a couple things I wanted to mention. One is that, well, actually, they're both things are related to the WIOA. The workforce centers, I know in Colorado Springs, and I just learned in Pueblo as well, and I'm sure this may be the case elsewhere in Colorado, are involved in helping youth get summer jobs. And there's actually a project funded by the governor of Colorado, the governor's summer job hunt. And I know of some youth with disabilities who are utilizing that service And then I just also wanted to mention that it's important to learn more about the WIOA and the fact that there are, and the WIOA is something that I think everyone is in process of learning and moving forward with, and it certainly is going to take some time, but there's lots of opportunities there that can be provided for youth who are still in high school. So I wanted to mention that. I've been showing you a couple of the slides about the SHIFT project